Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Pot Smoker's Bible. My name is Zion. I'm the author of the Pot Smoker's Bible, which contains the prophetic book of Zion, where I get my name and authority. It comes from the Ketuvim, or Old Testament of the Christian Bible. I use the King James Version of the Christian Bible to put together the prophecy of Israel from the scattered bits and pieces of testimony from the prophets, and it became the Book of Zion. Now, in order to publish the Book of Zion, I had to write another book called the Pot Smoker's Bible. It's the commentary to the Book of Zion. No, and in order to fulfill the prophecy, I'm publishing it on YouTube and across social media free of charge, which is the final stipulation for my ascension to Zion to publish peace. That's what I'm doing. And of course, to start a controversy that's going to destroy America. Well, okay, it's not going to destroy America because Trump already did that. It's just I'm giving us an alternative to Biden and the corporate police state, which is kind of what I'm discussing in the 19th chapter of the Pot Smoker's Bible. And it contains the 16th chapter of the Book of Zion. It's called They That Hate Me. I'm going to start where I left off yesterday. The legal status of alcohol and the abuse of the pharmaceuticals for profit makes the war on drugs a hypocritical exercise of the abuse of power and the public safety. My drugs only harm me. Your drugs harm society. The hypocrisy of the war on drugs belies its wholesome facade. This chapter also points out the violence used against my people. The rampant abuse of power by the police in this country is most prevalent against the blacks, but I wonder how much of that is racial as opposed to Zionite. My black people are are at double risk. They get a double whammy. First, for being black, then for being a drug user. But they aren't the only ones being killed. Every time a Zionite has a run in with the police, no matter their ethnicity, there is always a chance that it will turn ugly. All Zionites are in danger. But the black men of America, be they Zionite or otherwise, are in the most horrific danger of all. I may be white, but I'm not proud of it. To me, all humans are the same. Black lives do matter. They have to matter the most because they suffer the most violence. This violence comes from the cities for the most part. The wealthy live in high towers. The poor are beaten and deprived of everything their meager means allow. This ivory tower society has led us to a place where no one is truly safe. The Torah tells us that in a just society, everyone is content. But in an unjust society, the people will howl. Our last chapter illustrates that point. The only people happy in this society are the rich. According to the Torah, this is an unjust, unhappy society. And the blame for that, of course, is the government's. When a government, like ours, oversteps its given authority for personal gain, then it is time for that government to end. Our Bill of Rights even states that when the American government begins to take away the rights of the people, as it has for my people, then we are obligated to overthrow the government because they have been found to be guilty of violating their own precepts. As I've said before, the war on drugs is and has always been unconstitutional. It violates the Bill of Rights, the basis for all American laws. And as such, we Zionites have the right to self-determination, the pursuit of happiness, and above all, the right to privacy. So, the government is in the wrong. And history teaches us that when a government oppresses its citizens, eventually the people rise up and overthrow them. All, all totalitarian regimes end in an uprising. So, according to historical evidence, the people of Zion are in a position to rise up and overthrow their governors. So, all others, as all others have before them. Just look it up, it's in our history. No one can live forever under the gun. Those who are oppressed can only live that way for a time. Human nature itself gives us the will to live. Our newly awakened gray side gives us the right to exist. Those two factors makes us prime candidates for a revolution. We can't go on living our lives in jeopardy. We will become weary of the strain. Everyone has a breaking point. That place where you just simply stop trying to restrain your natural impulses. My people have reached that point. We are ready, willing, and able to do whatever we have to do to end this atrocity called the war on drugs. This society has tried to beat us into submission. They have tried to force us into believing their lies. They have tried to kill us outright. But we're still here. We are still Zionite. More so. No one, government or otherwise, can uncreate us. So, our future is set. The governments and society have put themselves in a position of loss. They have ignored history and human nature to create a situation that they cannot logically win. By oppressing an innocent people, they have set the stage for their own destruction. And now, it's done. My people didn't want this life. We just wanted to have a good time. We enjoy doing drugs. We like to get high. We love to stumble around drunk. We haven't hurt anyone. We don't force our way of life on anyone else. So why do we have to live like this? What real reason does the government have for denying us the right to use drugs? Prior to 1939, what evidence is there that drugs are so harmful to society that the government had to create laws to protect the citizens against them? Because that is the real question. By what right? So let's look at the facts. In the 19 teens, the first laws were passed against possession of a drug, cocaine. At that time, traveling salesmen were using cocaine to sell quasi-medicine to people. This cocaine-laced stuff was dangerous. No one had any way of knowing what else was in the so-called drug. Many people died as a result. The need for laws to protect people from these traveling salesmen was very real. It was necessary, but it was not cocaine that was the reason. It was the unsafe use of it that had to be addressed. Not the use of the drug in its natural state, but the dangerous actions of the salesman. That was the problem. Now, the next drug that was prohibited was alcohol. The prohibition of alcohol was the first true drug law. It sought to end all use of the drug. It was enacted to placate the overly zealous religious lobbyists who forced the government to pass it. As we all know from history, it didn't work. In fact, it was a disaster of major proportions. The Roaring Twenties roared because of the violence that came from the laws. The minority holier-than-thou religious fanatics that created the prohibition set in motion a horrific decade of bloodshed and debauchery that is still affecting us to this day. Our society is so violent today because of the violence that started in the 20s with the prohibition of alcohol. Anyone looking at the events of the 20s should realize that the government can't force its citizens to give up their vices. To do so is to invite rebellion. The speakeasies and the gang violence testified to that fact. Of course, the prohibition didn't last. Way too many Americans drank way too much alcohol to stand for such a law. So the first true drug law was a complete failure. Why would our government create similar laws when it was proven to be effective? Why would any government enact laws that didn't work? Because the Roaring Twenties was a very lucrative time in America. The government made a lot of money from the prohibition. Both state and federal governments expanded their internal police forces and their authority. It was a means to increase taxes and profits. The government profited off of the laws. Currently, the cost of the war, i.e., the government's profit, stands at $13.7 billion a year. That's as of this year, or last year, I should say. The true reason for the war on drugs is government profit. The war on drugs has created a police state. Every citizen of this nation is now under the government's watch. No one is safe from the police. Police violence has become commonplace. How many non-drug users have been killed by the police? I can think of several. The war on drugs has created a police force that shoots first and then says, sorry, not my fault. The violence of the society is a direct result of the actions of the state. Gang violence, as we know it today, began as a response to police brutality. People formed gangs to protect themselves from police violence. It was also necessary because there was no means to regulate commerce. Legal businesses have laws and regulations to ensure the rights of all concerned, but drugs have no established economics mainframe. Gangs are akin to corporations. It is business. Drugs are the commodity. The war on drugs created an unnatural economic environment, making it necessary for gangs to form. The war on drugs has done irrepressible damage to society. It has robbed us of billions of dollars. It has created a violent society in response to a more violent police state. But what is the reason the government gave the American people for creating the war on drugs? The reason the prohibition started was to suppress two minority groups and give a corporation an unfair means to profit. One of the largest megacorporations in America is responsible for the atrocities enacted against my people, Dow Chemical. In the 1930s, Dow introduced a new type of product, plastic. They produced products using chemicals instead of natural materials. Their new form of product, however, was expensive to make. Hemp was used by society to make the same products, but at a far cheaper cost. If Dow was to thrive, hemp had to go. So Dow lobbied the government to ban hemp. The lobbyists for Dow learned that the state of Texas um, was concerned with immigrants from Mexico who smoked marijuana and brought it from Mexico. And the state of Louisiana was concerned with the blacks who played jazz music and smoked pot, which they had been introduced to by the Mexicans from Texas. So he got together with these senators from Texas and Louisiana, and they took their concerns to Harry J. Anslinger. The rest is history. May the Grey watch over you, guide you, protect you, and keep you from all harm. May they teach you right from wrong, and may you be worthy of them. May your thoughts, words, and deeds reflect truth, good, and light, the unicorn way. Find your joy and pursue it. Make that your guild choice. It'll make you happy. stay happy and hypey. You do drugs. You have every right and reason to. Believe me, I know. I wrote the book. So I'm going to say later now. I love you way too much to ever say goodbye.